Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sports Insider. I'm Dan Labbe, and filling in for Chris Fedor today.
It's a big job. It's a big job.
Is Bud Shaw joining us on Sports Insider. We got a packed show for you today. We'll talk Browns with Tom Reed. We'll talk Cavaliers with Chris Haynes, and then a special guest to promote his new book, Dan Coughlin from Fox 8 is going to join us. So he's got some stories for us. We'll talk some sports with him. Dan's a great guy. He'll be the number one Dan on the set. I have to say that I rank myself, obviously,
you may have gotten,
way behind.
You may have gotten moved down on the depth.
All right, let's go ahead and talk Browns. Let's bring in Tom Reed live from Berea. Tom, how are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
All right, Tom, let's get to the decision to start Austin Davis. It took some people by surprise that Mike Pettine did not go to Johnny Manziel. The assumption, of course, being that this team needs to get a look at Manziel, but Mike Pettine said it's Austin Davis. Were you surprised?
No, not really. I thought that they might allow him to play. Give at least one start based off the way he finished and kind of the message that they were trying to send a couple of weeks ago. There's still a month left. There's still 4 games left after this. If Austin Davis doesn't do a very good job and they lose convincingly, then I think it's going to be all set for them to turn it over to Johnny Manziel. But I think that there's still enough time. And again, it's just like anything else. When you get yourself punished and get yourself in trouble, and you open the door for someone else to at least get their foot in there. And that's really what Austin Davis did at the end of the game. I think, you combine all those things, and it does not surprise me.
Tom, do you have any indication that Mike Pettine wanted to do more than just demote Manziel? That if it were up to him, Manziel wouldn't be on the team anymore?
No, I've not gotten that impression. I think I think that would have been. I don't think that was ever the case, or where the problems rose to that level, especially so late in the year. It'd be one thing if this was something happening earlier in the year where you could even maybe trade him. But at this point, I think they're just going to ride it out and see what happens. Again, he's a first-round draft pick. If you can get him in there and play him a couple games, even if you don't think he's a long-term future, maybe you can move him for some kind of a late-round pick later. So, no, I never got that impression.
Tom, when you look at Austin Davis, he had a good stretch of games in St. Louis when he started last year, had some struggles as well. What are your expectations for him?
Again, he's a younger quarterback. He's put a lot of work into it. Usually these kind of guys kind of find their level. There's a reason why it's year 4 in the NFL and they're not starting. But the only caveat I would say there is we have to remember the landscape of the NFL has changed, and so many of these guys come in from these option dual threat quarterbacks, and it takes them time to get into the league. And I've talked to Davis extensively about that, and he said he wasn't ready the first 2 years in the NFL. He didn't understand the game because he came from an option type of offense, the running, the kind of the spread offense, and it took him a while. So we'll see. I still think that I think he's probably more of a backup in the NFL than anything else, but give the guy a chance.
Tom, what would the scouting report be on him? I mean, as far as his arm, his mobility. I mean, we saw a little bit of it the other night, but not enough of a sample size. Yeah,
good mobility, decent arm, hard worker. Just not the biggest guy. I mean, I think Dan was out there yesterday. He doesn't overwhelm you with his presence. Let's put it that way. He's not you almost would think he's some kind of, high school basketball coach, or, he was drafted in Major League Baseball. He does look like a baseball player more than he does a football player. But again, he's had some success, and he's really had to work really hard to earn it. So, I can understand why he's a guy that, Pettine and the coaching staff would, let's face it, this is it's almost kind of a glorified exhibition season to end the year. You want to take a look at some of these players, and why not give them at least a look?
Tom, when you look at Johnny Manziel, I've got to say, it's hard for me to believe that if there is, in fact, a coaching change, a GM change, that you're going to find a guy, no matter what Manziel does, that's going to say, you know what, I'm all right tying my future to this kid. What is Johnny Manziel's future in Cleveland? Does he have a future in Cleveland?
TBA, to be determined how they finish up the season, and see what he can do, assuming he does get back in the lineup. But I would agree with you. I would think that if this group especially maybe beyond just Ray Farmer is out of here, then I think Manziel could be out as well.
Tom, for some people that don't follow transactions, why do you think, as closely as you do, why do you think they were so quick to sign Davis to a 2-year deal or whatever the extension was when he first came to town?
That's a greit's question. It's a guy that maybe they felt that they could develop, and also they just want to make sure they had him on the roster going forward, and then not let another team pick him up. I'm trying to think of the exact. He came here with 1 year left on his deal, I believe. It's just a guy that again he did win 3 games last year, and by the way, 2 of them were against Seattle and San Francisco, when San Francisco was still a pretty good team. So it's a guy that just chose to develop. And the other thing I think is that what we're just talking about, Johnny Manziel. Is Johnny Manziel going to be here? And their other quarterback's 36 years old. So why not have one guy in among that group that's young and they think has some kind of upside?
All right, Tom Reed joining us live from Berea. Tom, we'll let you go. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
All right, we'll now we'll wait for Chris Haynes, talk a little Cavaliers, and then, of course, we have our special guest, Dan Coughlin, will join us to talk about his new book. But, Bud, when you look at the future of Johnny Manziel, I mentioned this to Tom, it's really hard to believe that there's going to be a coach that wants to come here and say, yeah, I'll just hand the starting job to Johnny.
Right. I mean, I think there will be coaches who will agree to take the job if he's still on the roster, but I don't think there's a coach who says, I'll come here and the stipulation is that I have to play him and he has to be our starter. I don't see that. And I don't know why Haslam would want that.
Yeah, that was my follow-up. Do you think that would be a stipulation?
I don't.
Would he say to a guy, you've got to commit to Johnny?
Listen, we've heard, we think we know that Haslam was prominent in the drafting of Manziel. But what we've heard from Haslam are some pretty tough words about Manziel. When he has spoken about him, he has been clear about how it's time for this kid to mature and to start acting like a pro. You can't say that we've seen probably some improvement in that this year, but we're certainly nowhere near what's expected of him.
All right, let's go ahead and shift gears and talk Cavaliers. We'll bring in our Cavaliers beat reporter, Chris Haynes. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing fine, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, Chris, the Cavaliers had a loss to Washington, their first home loss of the season the other night. And, look, teams lose games, teams have poor effort, but this has sort of been a theme for this team at times, where the effort hasn't been there, the drive, whatever you want to call it. Is it cause for concern at this point?
Concern. I think if we start to see a pattern to where it will affect the outcome of the game, I think that's where it will be a problem. Maybe a little bit concerning. It's definitely not anything to jump off the ledge off of, considering the record that they have. But it's funny. They're going into these games, completely skipping the start lineup introductions and just waiting at the half court mark. They're there 3-4 minutes before the team get there, and it's supposed to be a symbol of them being ready and prepared. Like, let's get this game going. But we've seen what happened the last game in Washington. Against Washington. Washington came out, hit them with a 10-0 run to start the game, and so obviously them hanging out at half court didn't help at all. But they have to find out, or figure out, I should say, a way to get themselves up early on and keep their foot on the gas and just keep it there throughout the duration of the game. Washington may have figured out something. It's the same tactic Golden State used of playing some fast-paced ball. And, I think Black has to do a better job of finding out and detailing what exactly that team is doing. I think he has been late to adjust, with taking Mozgov out of the game. So, like I said, it's nothing to get, jump over legs about regular season. Plenty of time to figure it out. But I think it's definitely a little bit concerning.
Chris, LeBron has been obviously more engaged in his own team than he was at this point last year. What do you make of that, and is there any possibility that he can overdo that guys will get tired of that?
I definitely think there's a chance he could overdo it. I've never seen anything like it, man. I documented in detail last week exactly everything that he has done to try to get the organization as professional as possible, as strict as possible to uphold some rules, some boundaries. And you can definitely see it on the court. He's getting all up in guys' faces. Timothy Mozgov has gotten an earful of LeBron James. Seems like every single game. I wrote about the hoverboards. Those being removed from they can no longer ride those until so it definitely seems like a lot of the fun is being taken out. I definitely understand what LeBron is doing, where this is a sense of urgency. He'll be 31 at the end of this month. He desperately wants to bring a championship to the city of Cleveland. So I can see how this is just wrapping him up, and he's trying to make sure everybody else understands the magnitude of what's at stake. Is it going too far? Maybe a little bit. He may have to tone it down just a tad, because everybody is not that type of a creature like LeBron. LeBron, he can do that and still go out there and perform. Other guys may be a little bit uptight, and I definitely think that's the case with Mozgov a little bit. So we'll see how this thing plays out long term and see if he keeps this type of uptight atmosphere, going forward.
Do you think he's pushing quite as hard if Golden State is sitting there at 10-10 instead of 20-0?
It's not. That definitely has a part to play with it too, and I'll definitely mention that. But I think it's more so the fact that he is turning 31 at the end of this month. How many prime years does he have left? Usually, when you go on to the NBA Finals for the first time and you lose, that next year you're much more to go in there and take home that gold the next year. That next year is this year for the Cavs. And then you have Golden State going out there just taking it to another level, Stephen taking it to another level. So definitely it adds more urgency to the process. And so, when guys coming in on hoverboards or being late to treatment and, just being lackadaisical around the work area, that is concerning. And it's definitely something that needs to be addressed, and LeBron James did that. But like you mentioned, is it doing too much? Is it a little bit too much for these guys to handle? I don't know as of now, but like I said, if this continues to move along forward, if they continue with all these antics of just trying to keep it as funless as possible, we'll see what type of long-term effects that presents.
I love that we've mentioned hoverboards twice
in
an interview about the Cavs. It's fantastic. Last question for you, Chris. We mentioned Golden State sitting at 20-0 right now. Who's the second best team in the NBA right now in your mind?
The second best?
Yeah.
Wow. You know what? Man. The Cavs have to be in the conversation. San Antonio's still trying to figure things out. I'm going to go with, as of now, I'll go with the Cavs. I'll go with the Cavs, second best team. But let me tell you right now, there's a very dramatic dip from the best team to the second team. I will say that because I think you can point to probably 2 or 3 teams that you can argue for to be in that second spot. The Cavaliers have some work to do, but obviously, look, with Kyrie, when those guys come back, those are game-changing type players. So we'll see what, the Cavs can, what type of team they'll be once those two guys get back into the fold. And if they get back in the fold, you never know. The Cavaliers may end up being the number one team in this league. So I think that's what everybody is waiting at, anticipation of those guys coming back and seeing what's in store from there.
All right. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Take care, guys.
All right, and now it is time, of course, to bring in our special guest live in studio.
Dan
Coughlin joins us.
Gentlemen.
How are you doing?
Hey,
when your sports journalism career, your esteemed sports journalism career started, did you ever think we'd be talking about hoverboards before NBA games?
Never did. Were you talking about how? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Of course, Dan is here to talk about his new book, Let's Have Another. Look, you're a guy with a ton of stories to tell, and you tell a lot of them in this book. What's your favorite one, in particular from this book?
Well, now, I think that there are 3 particular chapters that make a great contribution to learning the history of Cleveland. One, of course, is Ted Stepien.
Sure.
For the first 2 books, I never touched him because he had 6 daughters, and I thought I don't want to. Not that they have any illusions about their father. But why make them feel bad all over again? But you know what? Now they're really grown up. I've got one or two of them in and out of rehab already, so I figured they'd grown up. So I did Ted, but I did him respectfully. Much of it through the eyes of his lawyer, Kent Schneider. Good guy, Kent. He was a very young lawyer when he became Ted's lawyer. In fact, Kent said that Ted was a lawyer's dream. He left lawsuits in his wake. Anyway, we came within 18 hours of this team, losing this team to Toronto. In the spring of late winter of '83, Ted was now going bankrupt because he had this nationwide advertising, offices in over 40 cities, making a ton of money. But the Cavs were draining $500,000 a month out of it. And by the way, that was not unusual for the NBA in those days. But you'll remember that. Half of them were losing money. But nobody was losing money like the Cavaliers were, because Ted was paying how many ex-coaches and ex-GMs? Oh my God, it was, anyway. So one Sunday afternoon, he tells Kent Schneider, Kent, come on down tomorrow morning, because at 9 o'clock in his office, he said, I'm selling nationwide advertising to an investment group in New York, and I'm going to move the Cavs to Toronto. And if this is going to happen at 9 o'clock the next morning, Monday morning.
Thanks for the heads up.
Yes. So anyway, Kent says that during the next 18 hours, he sweated through his shirt once, it dried out, and he sweated through it again. He called Dick Watson, the Guns attorney, and he began the machinery going that 18 hours later, the Guns had bought both those entities from Ted.
It happened that quickly.
Yeah, and they this was not on their radar to buy this basketball team. They owned the Richfield Coliseum, but it was, as it turns out, in their best interest to keep the Cavs here. They were their prime tenant. So anyway, this went on all night, and they reach an agreement. 9 o'clock in the morning, these four, as Kent Schneider described it, as these four sharks come in from New York, blood dripping from their fangs, ready to clean Ted out. They were going to take nationwide advertising, wildly the profitable company. And Ted goes into his back office up in the Statler office tower and tells Kent, hey, tell these guys the deal is off. He's about 31, 32 years old, this lawyer. And these guys come in from New York, these bloodthirsty, and Kent kept referring to them as the sharks, the four sharks. And he has to tell them the deal is off. They go ballistic. Who is this young lawyer telling us the deal is off? And then the president of Nationwide Advertising walks in, a big old 6'5" Irish guy with a red face, and he doesn't know that what's been going on. All he thinks is, Schneider has screwed up this deal. He threatens to throw him through the plate glass window from the 12th floor of the Statler office. But so anyway, I think this, I'd never heard these stories before.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that makes a contribution to Cleveland historical.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Then
Go ahead.
The second one is Canton-McKinley football, early 60s, when they got the death penalty. Do you remember that?
I don't.
Most people don't. The OHSAA gave Canton-McKinley the death penalty in 1963, I believe. They went down to Portsmouth. Well, recruiting was, we take Stark County football and no rules. Anyway, they were an assistant coach and two boosters went down to Portsmouth and stole two players from them. And they couldn't have done this more openly than if they had set off fireworks and said, hey, watch us. They went, the summer practice had already started, August. They were in preseason practice. And as they went down there, and in the afternoon, these two boys, brothers, practiced with Portsmouth High School. By midnight that night, they were living in an apartment in Canton and enrolled at McKinley the next day.
Sounds legal to me.
Yeah. So anyway, they got the death penalty. One season, no games.
Wow.
Remember when SMU got the death penalty?
Oh, yeah.
20 years ago. They still haven't recovered. Canton-McKinley, the next year, they were voted second in the state. But that year, when they didn't have any games, but they did have a team. They held intra-squad scrimmages every Saturday afternoon. and 5,000 people came out to watch them.
Is that right?
Yes. So people wonder, why are you so interested in Stark County football? Need I say more?
Yeah,
That's great.
God, no kidding.
Yeah.
Another guy you write about in here is Albert Bell, and
Yes.
you write about a particular incident that kind of frosted
Before
you a
we get
little
to
bit.
Albert Bell.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's
Go
all
ahead.
right. That's all right. You're paying attention. That's good. But I said that there were 3 particular
forgot,
chapters,
yes.
and the other one involves Allie LaForce. Remember Allie? She was on our high school football
Sure.
show on Friday nights?
Yeah.
Anyway, we'd rush back from the game. You've seen me in action on Friday nights. I remember
Talk about
one
sweating
game.
through a shirt.
No, listen.
Go ahead.
I remember one game, state championship game down in Canton, and I had a terrible cold. It was the Saturday night state championship game, and you come down out of the warm press box to get a couple interviews when the game is over, and I've been on the sidelines all night, and I had snot dripping all over. I was cold, sick, and you took one look at me and said, I hope they pay you a lot of money to do this.
And I was right.
Yes. No, you were. No, you were half right. They should, but they didn't. Anyway, so we on Friday nights we would rush back to the station with our videotape and get those highlights edited and our scripts written. And I always kept a set of dry clothes back at the station because who knows we'd get soaked
Terrible
on,
weather.
rain, some blizzards, whatever, and it was hectic. Getting back on the set in time the show starts at 11 o'clock, and I'm getting all that written and edited and change my clothes, get out on the set, and a couple people are helping me get my earplug plugged in and my microphone plugged in. And bam, the show starts, we're rolling tape. Allie, who was so good and a great teammate and knew what she was doing, well, you see her now on the network. She looked down and she said, all our mics were live. Telich and Rizzo was on the show. No, it was Rizzo. I don't know. But there were 4 of us, and she looks down and has to mouth the words. Couldn't say it out loud. For those who can't lip read, my fly was open. And so now, had to make sure that I waited. We were in a long stretch of video so that we don't come out live and here I am zipping up my fly. No. So anyway, those are, I think, 3 substantial chapters.
Yes.
That one is incredibly important to this.
Distinguished career.
Yes. But but people always ask me, what was she doing looking down there?
She's making sure everything looked perfect.
Yes. You, Albert Bell.
Well, yeah, I know
hated
that I had my issues with him too, but I know there was one incident that really bothered you about the Malleys. And if you could just tell that anecdote.
That's the first time I ripped him. And he had just signed up to do, as Malleys did, Big Star. They do a Kozar bar, anyway, they did an Albert bar. And he was supposed to be there for a little press conference, in that interview room down there. The next afternoon, at 2 o'clock, that meant he had to come in a few minutes early for his game. He doesn't show up. The Malleys are friends of mine. They were embarrassed. Were you there, Don, for the maybe you yeah.
I remember.
And everybody's there, but no Albert. And anyway, one of the clubbies told me that when you left last night, I said, you're going to come down for the press conference with the He said, no, I'm not coming. That's just the way the inconsiderate, rude person he was. And that's when talking about Albert Bell, that's a compliment.
Yeah, it wasn't like it was a volunteer
position
for him. He was being paid.
Well, so I wrote a column about that. That was in the Elyria Chronicle and the Lake County News Herald. And the next afternoon, I'm down there in the dugout. He comes out, looks at me, and says, "Nice article." Hey, he spoke to me first time.
Really. Can I quote you on that?
It's probably a nicer interaction than Hoynesy ever had.
Yeah,
right?
and many of us actually.
Well, I've written about that guy, I think, in all 3 books now. I'm glad that nobody ever had to vote for him for the Hall of Fame. I would have had a terrible problem with that. Yes.
He was a fascinating guy in a lot of ways, but really difficult. I won't even say complicated because I don't think it was that. I don't think Eddie Murray would say if you went up to talk to him, he'd say, "No, I'm sorry, sir. I would rather not talk today."
Yeah.
He was very polite about it. He really was. And Albert was, you'd get halfway toward him and he'd shove a chair at you.
There were two guys on that team who had no friends, Albert and Kenny Lofton.
Thank you.
Same
for
with
bringing
Kenny.
that up. Kenny needs the media now. He's in the movie business.
Right, yeah.
Very
right.
interesting.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I could go on with a couple more Albert
well, I can
stories
imagine.
that were in my other books. Yes.
I can imagine.
When you were telling the Stepien story, one of the things that kind of ran through my mind is I could imagine that story playing out today with Twitter and social media and the way that the team's going to get moved in 18 hours, how different it might have played out. What in your mind is the biggest change throughout your career in the media landscape, good or bad?
It's the changes are overwhelming. For example, now this has nothing to do with social media, but the first Browns game, the Plain Dealer, back in my Plain Dealer days that they ever sent me out to cover was the '64 championship game.
That was the first game?
Yeah, but having grown up in this town, why I figured that as I'm driving home, driving back to the paper here to write my story and give my notes to Chuck Heaton, why I'm thinking we're going to be doing this every year, because in the 50s we did do it every year.
Yeah.
So, okay, that was essentially football Super Bowl.
Sure.
The NFL championship game, and so I did the visiting clubhouse, the Baltimore clubhouse, and there were about 6 of us in there to interview Don Shula. There was me and Harry McClellan from the press, and each of the 3 Baltimore papers, I think, had somebody there. Were you there?
No,
Weren't you in Baltimore?
no.
Oh, you were Philly. That's right.
Thanks, Dan. I was 10.
Well, then I know how old you are now. And Don Shula, and there was a guy from the Chicago Tribune and a guy from the New York Times, and that was it. What, count about 6, 7? Anyway, Don Shula sat, this was the interview with the coach. There was not 1,000 people sitting in a big room. It was the 6 of us, and Shula sat on an old equipment trunk in his locker room.
After the NFL championship.
And that's where we did it.
Yeah.
Yes.
You didn't have people banging into you? Now you're one of the guys banging into people with cameras.
So all that, I'll never forget when I went on the baseball beat for the Plain Dealer back in '78. Jerry Holtzman from the Chicago Tribune said, "Let me give you some advice. Never sit on a story." So anyway, that was good advice, because there were, the other guy here in Cleveland was Sudik and Schneider prior to that, and why they had a relationship.
Separate book of their own.
Oh my God. So then there were just 2 people. Don't get scooped by the other guy.
Yeah.
Now, my God, there's 1 million people here with all their little Twitters and their little camera phones and all that.
Yeah.
Nobody can hide anymore.
Yeah.
No.
Not to mention TMZ is out there.
Okay.
Well, as a testament to how things have changed, you get to witness Bud Shaw doing a segment of our show where he responds to commenters.
All right.
Oh, I love the guy who invented the phrase Groundhog Day.
It's not bad, actually.
Time for Bud's spin.
All right, well, thanks. Mike Pettin named Austin Davis the starter for Sunday's game against the Bengals, despite calls for the Browns to start Johnny Manziel and finally find out what they have in him. One of the more recent arguments on Manziel's behalf cites John Gruden's support of him. And it's true. Gruden does support him. But I haven't heard Gruden talk up a quarterback quite so glowingly since, when was it? Yeah, when he said this. But that won't get in the way of the belief in some corners of Browns Nation that Gruden, maybe even a Gruden-Manziel combination, could be just a fix for what ails this franchise. And we go to our next comment. The guy says, if I had a nickel that says if Johnny Manziel was drafted into a system by Gruden, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and I say blah, blah kindly. I got a nickel that says that Gruden wouldn't like Manziel nearly as much if he were the one asked to give Manziel the keys and had to climb in the back seat, especially if the drive takes him on I-90 West with Colleen Crowley riding shotgun. I got another nickel that says Gruden would try to first talk Rich Gannon or Brad Johnson out of retirement before he'd put his reputation in the hands of any rookie, let alone one with Manziel's issues. I tend to believe, as the next commenter does, that it's laughable to think Gruden would target the Browns to make his return expressly to work with Manziel, though I probably would have added another couple exclamation points to that opinion. Even if Manziel shows us more on the field sometime in the next few weeks, I don't know how an organization holding a top 5 pick, should we call it a top 3 pick? 2,
Probably.
1, can ignore quarterback in the draft and go all in with a player who faces the personal and professional challenges that Manziel faces. Our next commenter says, for his own sake, the next quarterback should be a mama's boy who has never tasted alcohol. And well, I guess I'd like to remind this commenter that here's what the Browns did all of last year after Manziel's late-night escapades kept showing up on social media. Nothing at all. And here's what they did after his day drinking episode drew the attention of Avon police. Nothing again. Crazy as it sounds, they simply like a quarterback who's dedicated to football. That quarterback can go out and have a few beers. But he probably shouldn't lie about it when a video shows him cradling a bottle of champagne and lip-syncing profanities at the cell phone recording him. That's why we are where we are today, with Austin Davis getting a start ahead of Manziel. It's Manziel's fault, no one else's. And so the Browns go into a game against the 9-2 Bengals with a quarterback making his first start against them, as Manziel did a year ago in a 30-0 loss. Have the Browns lost all hope for something good to come out of Sunday's game? It depends on what your expectations are. By the way, I hear John Gruden likes what Dwayne Bowe brings to the table. Guys?
Oh, yeah, that was the John Gruden going all in on Dwayne Bowe's show on Monday night.
Hey, John Gruden has nice things to say about all young quarterbacks because he needs them in his quarterback camp when he does that ESPN thing. He would no sooner play one of these guys. He played Gannon, Johnson, Garcia. He would never play a young quarterback.
All right, thanks to Tom Reed for joining us, Chris Haynes as well, and of course, Dan Coughlin, his book, Let's Have Another. Lots of great stories in this book. He told us a couple. You got to read them all, though. It's called Let's Have Another. Where can folks pick this up at?
Oh, you can pick it up at most bookstores. Barnes & Noble has them. You can get it on Amazon.com. And you can dial up the Gray & Company website. They're located right here in Cleveland. Or you could run into me somewhere and buy it out of the trunk of my car.
That's the way to do it, because trust me, if there's anyone that you want to spend time talking to in Cleveland media, it's this guy right here.
Exactly.
Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks for having
really
me, guys.
appreciate it.
Okay.
That'll do it for Sports Insider. For Bud Shaw, I'm Dan Labbe. Thanks for watching.